I think people see new construction homes on the market, and I'm talking about like infill new construction. So like a new construction in an existing neighborhood. They see a spec house on the market, and they're like, "Oh, I can afford a new house." And then they talk to us about building a custom home, and they're like, "Well, how can it be so much more for a custom home? This spec house is on the market over here for this price, right?"
Right.
So what are those differences between a spec house and a production? Sorry, not production. A spec house and a custom home. You know, what's the difference there? Why is it so much more to build a custom home?
It boils down to quality, and I'm not going to say quality is going to be, really bad or terrible on a spec house. There's a kind of a basic quality one would expect. But let's take lumber for example. So if you're framing a custom home, typically custom builders, as you and I, are going to want to use framing material like Doug fir. So something that's going to be much more. It's going to be better. It can weather better. It's going to get wet, and so something that dries out. Maybe one's not going to warp or shrink and swell a lot. Something that's more dimensionally stable.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that's Doug fir. And then you might even do some other, let's just say they've got a 12-foot tall wall. And I know you and I had this discussion on one of your projects where you were investigating, I think, some LVL studs.
Yeah.
So you really had that nice dimensionally stable lumber.
Yeah. A straight wall on a tall ceiling.
Because when you start taping and floating that on drywall, you're going to see the waves and the oil canning. So in a spec house, they might do all that at a southern yellow pine, which is fine. It's perfectly acceptable. Engineers will accept it. But if it gets wet, it tends to warp, tends to shrink, tends to swell. And the framers don't like it because it's kind of brittle. So it'll kind of snap a little bit easier. And it's fine. But over time, you might, if it gets wet a few times and dry within that process, when you start to hang drywalls, and you're going to have a little bit of, wavy walls, and depends on how, if you're going to texture it, have a little bit of texture, it's fine. But if you want that nice smooth wall, you almost have to go to a better wood framing product. And that's one example that drives costs.
Yeah, or some spec builders might even use like a number 3 grade lumber.
Yeah.
Which is going to give some really wonky walls.
Yeah, and we use that for just like bracing, The other thing that I think drives costs within a spec house would be, let's just take kitchen cabinet hardware or cabinet hardware. Undermount glides. If you do the nice undermount KV glides or anything like that, Blum, those are going to be very expensive. I'll say probably your gold standard.
Yeah, $25 a pair.
Yeah, and then if you have let's say 100 of those, and just do the math, it adds up really quick.
Yeah.
Versus the regular slides or glides that are very basic, maybe they're $1, $2 a pair.
Right.
And so then there's a huge savings that you don't even see. And it's also how you build the cabinet. Is it a frameless cabinet? Is it going to be kind of what they call lip mold cabinets, so they're built in the field out of trim? So there's many ways that, and then as we educate our clients to understand that, we say, look, these things are not wrong. There's nothing wrong with these at all. But this is an option if you want to go that route. But if you want this look, based on the photograph you're showing me in that image on Pinterest or Houzz, this is kind of that level of detail.
And on the building performance side of things, the spec house is probably not going to be built with, like a zip system sheathing and spray foam insulation. And they're not going to go through kind of the same energy rating and testing that we might do on a custom home. It's hey, we're going to use the cheapest materials to get this thing done as fast and cheap as possible. Because that's the name of the game in investment real estate is get it done fast and cheap and maximize profits. Because usually there's an investor who wants to make a return.
Absolutely.
And that builder wants to make money too. So
yeah, and they have to take into account length of the time on the market, how long it's going to be on there. They probably have an interest payment. And then the other thing, aside from materials, might be the quality of the subcontractors that is going to really drive that cost. So I go back to framing again, because we've used that example. The framer who's going to build a spec house, the way he's going to frame it and build it is going to be different than the framer who does a custom home. But the labor costs are going to be very different. But it depends again on what, there's a whole level of service that goes with it. Because the framer for a spec house, he's just going to show up, frame, and move on. Versus a custom guy, he's going to ask you questions. He's going to say, hey, I noticed a few little things here. Can we work these out ahead of time so I don't have to rebuild this component twice or 3 times? And so that's the kind of, it's a whole mindset about building a custom home, not just your architect or your builder, but your whole team all the way down your subcontractors. It's how they approach building to be efficient as well.
Just one last comparison there. Talk about what the difference is between even that and a production home. You go from a spec house infill to a production setting. What are those differences even like in price?
Yeah.
Or what do you get for that price difference?
Well, I'll put it this way. My lumber supplier, he only does a custom side, but he's got some production side as well. And he jokingly said, he's like, the custom guys, when you guys get your lumber delivery, he's like, you guys are checking everything to make sure everything is, perfect what you were looking for. And you'll send some things back because maybe they don't meet your expectation or your framers. He's like, production, they're happy they got lumber. So I think that it sets the tone. And a lot of times those project managers might be managing 30 or 50 homes at one time.
Yeah.
So what level of detail can they pay attention to? There's a lot of autonomy with the subcontractors there versus a custom home. There's not a lot of autonomy. There is some to the subcontractor because you need them to do their job and you don't want to get in their way. But there's also a lot of back and forth and communication of what are you seeing? How do you feel? How's this looking? Do you have any concerns? So it's a whole different mindset.
And those guys are also buying in bulk. I mean, they're buying
Absolutely.
the same tile, probably by the multiple container load.
Yeah.
The roofing material, everything. They're buying that stuff in this huge economy of scale. And they're building that same floor plan over and over. They may have 5 floor plans.
Yeah.
And they're building the same floor plan. The subcontractors give them a massive price break because they can build those in their sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a friend that used to work at, I don't think he was an architect, he was a designer. He worked in his office in putting together these plans, and they knew exactly how many sheets of plywood they would use per project. And if they ended up using 1 or 2 more sheets per job, they would ask questions like, why are you using more? And it doesn't seem like a lot, but let's just say plywood was, I don't know, $10 then, $9. And I mean, you have that over 300 homes a year, that eats into the production builder's profit.
Especially when those prices are up to $60 a sheet for the same plywood, right?
Yeah, but they're, like you said, economy of scale. They can they can pre-purchase. They say, hey, I know I've already committed to 300 houses this year. I can buy all that lumber now, and I can store it in a warehouse. I can do what I need to do with it, protect it, and then use it when I need it.
I mean, I think that the differences are, they are the economy of scale, but I think, like you said at the beginning of this, the quality and what they're putting into it is the biggest difference, or one of the biggest differences.
So I think really what it comes down to is that mindset in terms of how you build things. In custom, it's what the term implies. I tell our clients, building custom is like working with an architect and a custom builder. It's like having a suit or a dress made to your liking. You pick up the fabric, it's put on you, the measurements are taken, the inseam, everything is cut to fit you and to make you look the best as possible within that realm. And that's exactly what building a custom home is, and working with an architect or builder that's going to care about those details, because it's also their reputation. They're known for producing quality work, independent of style. And so if it's something that they also want to be proud of the work, but it's also a team effort that in how you build, it's really more of a mindset and how you get there than it is. And quality is very important. But I can have the best quality subcontractor, but if the mindset isn't there, we're not going to be able to get to that part.
I also like to say you're building a prototype. And so this is the first time this house has ever been designed. It's the first time this house has ever been built. So we are figuring things out on the fly.
Yeah.
If I build this exact same house again next month, I can do it cheaper.
Right.
Probably because now we've worked out all the bugs.
Yeah.
We don't have to allow as much contingency because we know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
Right. But no, we're going to build this thing one time. It's a one-off prototype. If you go to any company that does design on any kind of product, the prototype's always going to cost more.
Exactly. And I'm glad you said that, because I think when the homeowner's selecting a builder in this regard it's a one-off prototype. But what you should be interviewing that builder on, aside from quality, is their process. How does their process allow for that one-off prototype to give you the best result in the end? And I think that's one of the things that we overlook. And that price per square foot, when people want to go to when they think about cost, it's kind of a run to the bottom. And you're going to get a builder, in my opinion, whose process can't deliver that product in the end. And it's not his fault, because he maybe doesn't have the team, doesn't have the experience, and he just doesn't know, or she doesn't know how to achieve this. But if you go to a quality builder who's got a very good process, they're going to be able to produce that for you, and your expectation is going to be met 100%.